Prep all you want, I think I would rather die in the first wave. People who grew up with doomsday prepper parents, what was it like? I learned how to hunt when I was 6. For my 11th birthday, I learned how to make a bow and arrow with the contents of my hiking kit and caught a rabbit for lunch. I was then shown how to use said rabbit's bones and internal organs to fish, and we had trout and perch for dinner. My dad is of the mind that doomsday preppers who just stockpile food are idiots, because even if they survive the apocalypse, all they're doing is turning themselves into particular fat swines for the inevitable bandits to look for. Better to be able to hunt and gather food. My doomsday kit is just a bug-out bag in my walk-in pantry. This makes me think of the mother of a friend of mine. She had a small room off the side of the kitchen, shelves filled floor to ceiling with tins. It wasn't about doomsday. She had starved as a child in Holland during World War II, aged around 5. She didn't do any other prepping. I don't believe she thought it would happen again. She was a smart, capable woman living a continent away from Holland by the time I met her. I suspect the tins were a psychological safety net, a way of soothing childhood trauma. We were always too poor to fully prepare for the end times, although my mom still believes they are coming. Fun fact, if you don't have food storage of your own, create a map of all the Mormons in your town so when poop goes down you can take theirs. This was actual advice from my mother. She grew up in Utah and it's a well-known fact that Mormons are supposed to hold on to 7 years of food storage at all times in case of Jesus. It was also a plot point in an S.M. Stirling post-apocalyptic novel that a group of people stumbled across an abandoned Mormon house which set them up nicely for food for a bit. So yeah, make a Mormon friend for the end times. Bottles and bottles and bottles of water in the garage. My mom bought the bulk packages from Costco and stuffed them there. I wouldn't be surprised if there were over 100 plastic containers in there. The world's gonna end panic mentality mostly comes from my mom's side, and it usually happens in waves. Things will be chill for a while, and the all of the sudden packages with no electricity hand crank radios and portable generators will show up at our door. She claims that she makes ambient purchases while half asleep, but I think she really just is that paranoid. A few times, she's mentioned buying a cow. For its milk. In case we're forced to live off the land or whatever, so we can still have milk. And after explaining to her that no, we absolutely do not have the room or faculties to take care of a whole cow, she starts up with the same line of questioning, but asking if we can get a goat instead. We don't even have a front or backyard. My dad stocked textiles, toiletries, non-perishables, and water to an extreme amount. Our entire basement was basically a bunker. It could be locked from the inside at both the top and the bottom of the stairs, and we had huge drums of potable water that probably stood to about stomach high on me now as an adult. We also kept old 2-liter bottles, old Pepsi bottles, for non-potable that we stacked like wine on heavy shelves, as well as rice and dried beans in vacuum-sealed containers. He was constantly buying things at old surplus outlets. Gas masks, iodide tablets, rucksacks, etc., and taught us how to make bullets using a shell cleaner and powder packer. Like that one poster above mentioned, we also typically had about every few weeks a few days where we ate next to nothing. And we were taught a lot of both local and non-local plants that could be edible, clover, acorns, dandelion, etc., and how to prepare them, as well as things that could be health beneficial, clover, cherry bark, mullein, etc., and how to prepare them. We rarely got to go hunting, because of where we lived at the time, but he did teach us how to set various snares and traps, like figure fours and pitfalls. And anytime one of our traps succeeded, he would use it as an opportunity to teach us how to clean and prepare meat not just for that day, but how to cut and dry it for future use. I have to say, knowing how to brain tan a rabbit skin is not something I ever expected to come up in conversation as an adult as much as it actually does. I grew up Southern Baptist. We were taught that the rapture was going to happen any day. Every night I was afraid to go to sleep because I might be raptured before I woke up. I wasn't going to get to grow up, get married or have children. As I went through my teenage years, I didn't plan for my future as I should have because we weren't going to be here next year. My mother never bought Christmas wrapping paper on sale because next Christmas wasn't going to come. If I knew then what I know now, I would have done many things differently. My boyfriend grew up as Jehovah's Witness and he said they constantly avoided planning anything in the future because the end times were always imminently arriving. Every news item about wars, souring relations between countries, natural disasters, etc. would just reinforce it. Parents don't bother sending kids to college because it won't be needed when Jesus sets up the new system. Luckily he insisted on going to college and is no longer part of that religion. He still gets triggered occasionally when there's a lot of bad news going around. I was raised Catholic, they didn't teach us about end times, just good people all go to heaven, bad people to hell, etc. Always try to calm him whenever that happens. I'm a bit of a prepper myself, but just to the extent of having a 2-month food and a 1-month water supply. I live in Manila, and the idea of an 8+ earthquake that wrecks the infrastructure of a metropolitan area with 13 million people is the stuff of nightmares. My dad was very freaked about Yellowstone exploding. He sat me down and said, "You and everyone you know is going to die under 4 feet of ash. We don't get out of here now." I must have been 11 years old. Yup, we had lots of food that was thought to be shelf life free, it wasn't. We also took hella family trips outside of the ash zone. Got to see a lot of the country from it. I have also developed paralyzing anxiety in my late 20s. My stepdad kept every map he'd had so we could know the non-government roads, aka the ones that might be forested, but not full of panicked dead civilians in now road-blocking vehicles. He taught me to hunt, fish, and all the gross cleaning and butchering methods as well as how to forage. We canned everything and had a basement full of non-shelf expiring foods. Had a huge garden of our own. He also taught us how to make alcohol out of like anything because you will need a cocktail to get through an internet-free world. Honestly, it felt very normal, and we got some sweet skills that most don't have. I still suck at directions though. Was dope to make it through the mad cow disease breakout since all our meat was hunted or through butchers that weren't affected. My parents didn't get into it until later in my life, but in 3 years they have built a farm. Chickens, turkeys, rabbits, a goat at one point, a pig. They stocked up on ammo, like thousands upon thousands of bullets. They subscribe to all right-wing groups possible, whether it be Facebook, or the Watchmen of America which regularly do doomsday drills. They tried to get me in on everything. They are convinced Obama is the Antichrist. They listen to Glenn Beck every day. I try to avoid all conversations about anything like that with them. It usually ends in a fight, and I do not want to hate my parents. My mom always talked about the end and she bought all these survival kits and 3-year food supply packages and stuff. One day I told her that if God wanted us to die he'd let us die and it wouldn't matter how many things she bought. I think she held up a little bit after that. Dad wasn't a full-on doomsday prepper, but he was a paranoid schizophrenic. He had a stock of MREs that I had now and then. They weren't bad. Also canned Ensure back when it came in cans. Also learned a lot about stuff like maintaining salt after sweating. Dad used to have me lick a teaspoon of salt after our walks. Tons of flashlights and batteries in the house. I remember him teaching me how to use a gas mask just in case. We live in upstate New York, so yeah, not exactly a war zone. He had a generator just in case the power went out, honestly not a bad idea because he lived in a place where winter could get pretty hairy. I will say Y2K had him totally spooked. We used to joke that he was Bert from Tremors minus the guns. Not quite that extreme, but I was raised Jehovah's Witness. They didn't have a specific date, but it was always within the next decade, for sure. So I grew up thinking that all my non-JW friends would be dead within 10 years, which was not a pleasant thought for a 6-year-old. In class I used to worry that Armageddon would strike and I'd be stuck in a classroom of dead people till my parents found me. Religion. My family teases me for prepping, even though they've used my water supply when our water was cut, and torches when our electricity went out. There's a difference between rational and irrational prepping, folks. I still eat the cans of food I rotate. There is enough food for 2 weeks. Most of the time I use it for times I was too tired to do grocery shopping after work. Also had a smoke-grade face mask. It wasn't so crazy when the bushfires caused the air to be hazardous to breathe in across the country. I know that some of the people at high risk of the bushfires could definitely benefit from a mobile ham radio or even crank radio. The telco providers had cut communication in those fire-affected areas. Knowing the right information, like if those bushfires are coming your way, quick and to evacuate, or the ability to make a distress call could have, and will, be useful. The only people I think are crazier than people who go overboard with prepping, are the people who think nothing will ever go wrong. City people are the worst. My sister went on holiday with her friends to an island. A monsoon swiftly hit and they weren't able to leave the building, let alone fly off the island. They were warned by authorities to fill their bathtubs with water before it was cut. 6 grown adults forgot about it, lol. They went 3 days without water. My neighbors, being a man and a woman, believed the world was ending in 2012. Starting in 2010 they started collecting canned food and their house was just full of canned soup and ravioli. To repent for Jesus in mid-2012, they gave all their stuff away except their off-road truck, their array of canned food, and some furniture. They also started collecting real gold items and some diamonds, so if the economy crashed they could use it to trade for stuff. Coming past 2012 they are mostly back to normal, though they are apparently now into sexual domination because of how they specifically prepared for in 2012. I feel I don't want to know the specifics of that line of dominoes. My mom hoards a ton of canned food everywhere in the house, along with random tools she's been told will be helpful, and so many paper towels and rolls of toilet paper. The guns are another thing. Everyone in my family is content to let her do her thing and spend thousands of dollars prepping. There are so many useless things that take up a ridiculous amount of space there, all while she complained that we had too much stuff and needed to get rid of our actual belongings to make more room. Everyone she knows gets printouts of the newsletters she signed up for with prophecies about the end times. When I was still living at home, she'd walk into the room at random times to give me hour-long lectures about the coming wars and end times and how sinners are responsible for it. It was really stressful, especially because I have anxiety, which I'm sure isn't because of growing up in a paranoid atmosphere at all, and I still have nightmares about apocalyptic scenarios. I've forced myself to develop a more accepting view for my own sanity, which is essentially, there are too many options to prepare for all of them, and I don't know how much I want to survive in a post-apocalyptic world anyway, so I'm going to enjoy the time I have without stressing too much about what-ifs. Cognitive behavioral therapy has been really helpful for dealing with the paranoia that still pops up sometimes, and I really recommend it for anybody who grew up in that atmosphere and has anxiety stemming from it. My mom is convinced that in the apocalypse toilet paper would be as good as currency. She has an entire room in her house that is filled from wall to wall, floor to ceiling with toilet paper. It's like a Costco aisle. We are forbidden to talk about it, because she doesn't want to be killed over it. Keeps it in the down low. Growing up it didn't seem weird because it was normal, but now that I'm an adult and a mother myself, it seems so crazy to me. My dad is a doomsday prepper. My whole life as a kid, he spent his spare time preparing for the inevitable collapse of the United States due to corruption. Red-blooded religious Republican. Every Christmas, Dad would ask for freeze-dried food, knives, ammo, DIY manuals, and other stuff. He would spend his spare time with us as kids going to second-hand thrift stores to see what cool things we could find and fix up, the whole time talking about current events and politics and conspiracy theories. My dad taught me everything I know. How to fix computers, how to keep a clamp on my internet privacy, how to handle firearms safely, how to keep a level head in a crisis, how to plan ahead, how to vet my sources for bad information, to never trust anyone in a position of power, how to camp and find food and shelter. The apocalypse still hasn't happened yet, but it brought me a lot of comfort and it really grew a strong bond with my father. He never wrote me off for being a girl. He taught me the exact same skills he taught my younger brothers. He never treated me like I was a lesser person. When all the other men I knew in our rural town didn't give me a second glance. My dad taught me how to force them to look my way and acknowledge I was just as tough and competent as they were. In some cases, even more so. It was empowerment that I just wouldn't have had otherwise in rural Utah. My dad and I were, and still are, very close. We don't share the same viewpoint anymore. I can't talk politics or ecology with him anymore. He still thinks that global warming is fake and that immigrants are all illegals, but mostly good people escaping bad governments, and that the government is going to switch to fascism and martial law any day now. He still hoards old junk on the promise that he'll fix it one day. It took Sandy Hook for him to realize that Alex Jones was a paranoid psychopath who profited off of lies he believed. It took me a long time to realize, but my dad was a prepper for one reason and one reason only. He loved us, and was terrified of the unthinkable happening to us. And when times were lean and cash was scarce, the freeze-dried food in the storeroom kept us fed, and the propane heaters kept us warm. He wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, no matter how far-fetched or mundane, we had our bases covered. But looking back, my father damaged himself by isolating himself in paranoia and constant anxiety. Yes, it taught me helpful skills that I still use every day, despite the shocking lack of an apocalypse or martial law, and yes, it helped me bond with my dad. And yes, I still look forward to the new pocket knife we all get on Christmas, that I always keep in my back pocket. But a part of me wishes he had just gotten therapy instead of getting guns and knives and dry food. Mormon parents. We're instructed to have 7 years' worth of food for when Jesus comes. The entire basement of our house was just food and water supplies. Literally stacks and piles of food and water bottles. All kinds of non-perishable goods, like freeze-dried foods. My dad also always used to say our neighbors have received the same warnings we have. If they come here looking for handouts, we're going to tell them to look elsewhere. The odds that you can survive doomsday, regardless of how prepared you are, is almost zero. Doomsday happens. The cities go into chaos and looting, gangs form, those gangs move into the country and suburbs. The country and suburbs have already banded together and we have ourselves a nice neighborhood and house-to-house war. Both groups have gone to ground during this process and have killed every deer, cat, chicken, dog, rabbit in an attempt to survive. It's a last man standing and your only hope is to survive long enough for planting season because it's impossible to hunt. Then there will be tribal war for as long as we can imagine while ruthless people try to set up their own ruling government so they can be king. Prep all you want, I think I would rather die in the first wave. Thanks for listening to Radio Doomsday. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell if you want to survive the apocalypse. Click the right box for the Cults playlist. And here is today's movie tip if you are into this topic. The best apocalypse movie is The Road.